Okay, so now to segue into our next event, the Where Do We Go From Here panel. And I guess first, before we say where do we go from here, we should ask why are we going anywhere? Let's just take a quick look at the numbers. According to the Pew survey in 2012, people who identified themselves as atheists plus people who identified themselves as agnostics, that's 5.7% of the population. That sounds like a tiny minority when expressed in percentage terms. But when you consider that America has 314 million inhabitants, the United States, 314 million people, take 5.7% of that, and all of a sudden you're looking at around 18 million people who do not identify with a religious belief. 18 million. That's what we have to work with. If you add the nones in, the people who claim no affiliation, suddenly you're up to about 20% of the population. And the nones are the fastest growing demographic. So things are changing, things are happening, but there's kind of a mystery because we are still culturally and politically marginal. We still don't have very much influence. We don't get our way. They still pass laws that are odious to us. We still have very little, if any, representation in Congress, none on the Supreme Court. And you wonder how such a large chunk of people can be, that ineffective. I'll be flat out honest with you. We're ineffective. We have the people. We need to get to point B, which is effectiveness. And I know that this may be a controversial comparison, but the thing that makes me think about effectiveness, regardless of what you think about what they think or what they do, effectiveness is the National Rifle Association. And what is the National Rifle Association? 5 million people sending $35 a year to an organization, and because they have that, they are politically invincible. No federal legislation has passed that they substantially disagree with since the early 90s. And how do we get to that point? How do we become politically invincible? How do we go from irrelevant to invincible? The numbers are right here, 18 million atheists and agnostics. And the benchmark has been set by the NRA. If you can get 5 million people to give $35 a year to a national organization, you're politically invincible. We've got the numbers. I think most of us have $35. Why aren't we to that point of organization? There's a second problem too. And this is at the individual level. You've got all these individuals in small towns and places all over the United States. Most of them have no access to a group like the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. Most of them are shunned, marginalized, excluded from their communities. Many of us from small towns live as hermits, cut off from the benefits of social interaction, from friends and networking, information, learning. And that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable that many people either have to live in the closet or in the shadows. And so these are the two problems that we seek to answer tonight with our panel of where do we go from here. And so I'd like to introduce the panelists. We have Matt Dillahunty, Phil Ferguson, Leewood Horvath, Susan Heffington, and Dan Barker. And the question is, where do we go from here for those reasons? Thank you.
Check, check. 1, 2. Yeah, I believe Ann is.
Yeah, come on, Ann.
Ann is as well, our award-winning member, Ann. So where do we go from here? It's a good question. We've got there's a local perspective to this and a national perspective to this. Let's start with I guess a national perspective, and then we'll bring it down to a local level. So would either of you care to chime in on trends that you see, or what we can do, to coalesce with other organizations to help the secular movement kind of get our way when it comes to bettering our communities?
Yeah, hand it to the guy who runs a local group to talk about the national stuff. And actually, I don't run the local group anymore. I served as president of the ACA for 7 years, and Jen Peoples is president now. And part of the reason for that is, I need a break. But the other part is that one of the questions that we get most often is, you guys seem to have this wonderful group down there in Austin. I don't have anything like that around me. There's no atheists in my town, which is false. And inevitably, if we go looking, quite often they find that there actually is a group in their area that they didn't know about. In some cases, there are multiple groups that don't know about each other. There were various efforts to get these groups communicating. One of the things that I'm working on now is to build a website, a national organization, where you can go on, put in your zip code, and it will identify the groups that are closest to you. And if there's not a group that's sufficiently close to you, then it will give you all the information you need to start a local group. And while I love the national conventions and the state conventions and the big events that are going on, I love going to them and interacting with people, and they are good and we should keep doing them, we have to do a better job of building little small communities. If there's 300 churches, I participated in an Explore God initiative in Austin, and there were 250 some odd churches that signed up for this, and that didn't include like the Catholics and some others. And I was like, how are there so many churches here? And maybe one or two secular groups. And we need to do a better job of building, even if it's just 10 people in the middle of nowhere. Those 10 people need each other, because the biggest things that people are at risk for is losing their social networks. And so I'm doing a little bit in that area. I don't know for sure that I'm going to solve the problem. But one of the things is, everybody who comes here, who lives somewhere else out in Arkansas or wherever you're from, if you came here because you feel alone where you are, when you get back where you are, you can stop feeling alone, because hopefully you've been able to network with some of these people and build up these small communities, and then sign up on the website so more people can come. And it's not live yet, but that's
one thing I can talk about, just for, I guess, point of information. I'm on the board of the Secular Student Alliance, and I'm not here talking on their behalf today, but it is growing like crazy. 5 or 6 years ago, they had 40 groups. Now it's 400 groups. 5 or 6 years ago, they had 3 high school groups. They now have 50 high school groups. There are 25,000 high schools in the United States. We are in 50 of them. So the growth is staggering. I've often told people the amount of effort one can spend helping someone who's 13 or 15 out of religion is a fraction of what it takes to help someone who's 50 out of religion. So, you know, I love everyone who's 50 that comes out of religion, and any age comes out of religion, but if we have limited resources, and we do, if we can make sure the college students and high school students have a group that they can join, hopefully they won't repeat some of the mistakes that I made, where I was a hardcore atheist since 13, but I ended up almost raising fundamentalist children. I had a friend of mine who called me when his kids were 16 and 17, and he had decided for the first time in their lives to talk to them about the fact that he was an atheist. And he never went to church, but his wife did, the kids did, and he sat them down and he says, I want to tell you what I think. And they said, we were warned that this day would happen. We were warned that someday you would try to take us away from Jesus, and we've been informed not to listen to you from this point on. And so he calls me in tears, what am I supposed to do? And all I could basically tell him is he's screwed. He's lost already. The only thing he can do now is not ruin it. He could try subtle things, be there, be a good parent for them, and maybe when they get to be 22 or 25 or 28, they might have questions and respect him as the father, because that generally doesn't come from the 18-year-old. You know, it comes a little later when they mature, so that he could still be there. But if he pushed, he would be out completely, because they were set up to not listen to their father anymore. So that's why I do the talks on kids, and why I love the SSA. So, you know, once you give to your local organization and the group here, consider giving money to the SSA and helping them out. That's something we can do to grow the base nationally, and so we get those numbers where we start turning the tide when elections come. I see it as a win when someone like Sarah Palin gets up on stage and gets laughed off. That's when we've turned the corner and we know we're in the right direction.
Now, there's several national organizations that are all going for the same cause, and of course Dan is with the Freedom of Religion Foundation, so you can tell us a little bit. It takes a lot of the local people to contact your group, and that's where you guys help out. I know I have several times had situations in my locale to where I thought, this seems to be a separation of church and state issue. One thing that I'm always harping on is the darn religious element of invocations at the beginning of civic meetings. And I try to tell everybody on the Pink Atheist podcast that, if you spot something that you see as a violation, reach out either to a local group, like for Arkansans, it could be the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers, or you can go to a national organization that's got a little more clout to them, like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, to help lend a hand, and they can identify whether or not the experience that you think is a violation, whether it actually is, and if it is, then they may be willing to help out, and if it's not, they can tell you why it's not a violation, and maybe you've learned something. Can you tell us about some of the efforts that you guys continually see around the nation?
Yeah, thanks. Freedom of religion, freedom from religion. But that happens.
Forgive me.
That's right. I absolve you of your sins. So where do we go from here? I think I can answer that with just one word. Lunch. No, really, there is a word I'm going to say. But lunch is not a bad place to go. I mean, we're biological organisms, and we live we all have our lives to live, right? We have to make a living, and we have to get through life. But I would answer that question in one word by saying complain. Just complain. Some of you have to keep your heads down, and we all know that. You might run a local business in town. It would not be prudent to risk the livelihood of your livelihood and your children's and all that, and that's fine. Atheism and agnosticism is not some top-down thing where here's what the Pope says, If Matt decided to declare himself the bishop of America, of atheist America, we would all laugh at him, right? I mean, because, and I think this is important, unlike religion, free thought is not a top-down thing. It's a bottom-up thing. It's the people themselves. Why is it that Europe today is, after so many centuries of religious divisiveness and killing each other, and Catholics killing Protestants, and all, this huge continent over there with all these gorgeous empty churches now? What happened over there? Did some atheist missionaries go over to Europe and start proselytizing? Did we get some organized campaign over in Europe to try to get everybody more secular? It was nothing top down. It was just the people themselves bottom up. And I think that's what's happening with the Secular Student Alliance. The students themselves are just on their own, bottom up. This is like a movement that has no followers. Because to be a follower means there's this leader that's telling you what to do. Here we have this totally upside down movement, which is what happened with the United States. Instead of having a sovereign authority, we turned it around and said, we the people. It's a bottom up thing, and we all think our own thoughts. And my mother-in-law, Ann Gaylor, has always said, you can't raise children. Children raise themselves. Just naturally, biologically, children raise themselves. Parents are facilitators. Parents give them a place to live. And her whole philosophy was let the kid think their own thoughts, let them come at it on their own. Don't be so worried about what's going to happen, because trust your kids. And she didn't do a very bad job with that. I married one of the kids, so she produced some great kids just with this philosophy of letting people just bottom up think for themselves. So I think we should not be too uptight about how are we going to change America into our image kind of thing. Like we have a responsibility to make everybody more secular. I think we should trust the young people. We should give them resources. And now the internet, of course, has been a huge difference from 30 years ago when I started doing this stuff. It was totally different. But I think if you want to know what to do, if you want a take-home message from this conference, at least from what I talked about, then complain about something. You don't even have to get into an argument. If somebody says something religious, you don't have to get down and talk about the ontological or the Pascal's way. You don't have to do any of that stuff or moral, absolutes. You can just say, I disagree. That's it. You don't have to. You just let everybody else know that there's someone else who disagree, and that can turn on a light for a lot of people. If they see someone else just acknowledging we have a chapter in Alabama, and when they were first starting 20 years ago, they were meeting in a living room. Now they have a big property and a meeting hall and a big lake and pavilion. They've got things going. But they were just meeting in the living room, and James Howard, one of the founders, was sitting there on the couch. The front door opened, and a woman walked in, and he looked at her and he said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "What are you doing here?" They were neighbors. They shared a fence. The back property had a fence. For 20 years, they didn't know that they were non-believers. They just assumed that they were Baptists. They didn't have any bumper stickers on their cars, and they were kicking each other. If only we had said something. Just if only I'd said something, we could have had all this good time of free thought fellowship. And so I guess my advice, where do we go from here, is say something or complain about some abusive state-church separation, and let's trust the next generation. The next generation is smart, they're educated, they've got the internet, they've got resources, and of course somebody like August Brunsman organizing secular students, to help them. But it's not like a bishop doing it. It's like facilitating what's already going to happen naturally. Whatever happened in Europe looks like it's starting to happen on this continent as well. So let's be there to facilitate that change that's going to happen all by itself.
I want to jump in and echo what Dan says. Dan doesn't know this, but he's my BFF. As a lawyer, people in the group come to me and say, there's a church-state violation and I'm angry about it, or is this a church-state violation? I go to Dan's brief bank and I call up FFRF and I say, what do we do? What's your advice? And I can email an attorney on his staff. I can look at the documents that they've got online. They've got a wonderful FAQ section. If you need to know something, they have it all written down. But one of the most important things that FFRF does for us is support us. Now, the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers as a group, yeah, we do a ton of social stuff together. And one of the reasons we decided to develop the social side of us is because when you know you've got support, it makes it easier to speak out. When you know there are people behind you. And Leewood and I are famous for speaking out and talking to the press and getting in other people's faces. When we see something that's not right, we are not shy about going on TV. We will speak for you. If you don't need to speak, or if you need to protect your kids in school or whatever, Leewood and I will speak for you. I don't mind getting hate mail. I think it's hilarious, and I'll post it on our website. And knowing that we've got us, you guys have us. You have the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. The Arkansas Society of Freethinkers has FFRF that also you guys have. We have each other, and we can pool our resources to get done what we need to do.
On that note, so Dan mentioned that FFRF has 20,000 members, supporters right now. And my question is, why is that not 1 million or 2 million or 3 million? The right wing has us together. Their organizations have, many supporters, but we are kind of a silent demographic in that regard. We've got these millions and millions of people who agree with our point of view, but how many of them actually do something about it? And if you look at the architecture of the religious right, how it's built, it starts with people at the bottom. They're members of these social clubs called churches at the next level up. And those churches get them involved, harness the energy, capture some resources, and funnel those to these top-level organizations, the lobbying firms, the national organizations, that focus on the family and whatnot. And that's their architecture. And my question to the panel is, could we imitate that architecture, which has been proven successful? Should we imitate it by having local social groups that then funnel the enthusiasm and the energy toward the national organizations?
I believe that it takes the smaller groups, starting from the bottom and moving up to the larger groups. I know for this group, many times we started out meeting in Sybil's living room, 5 or 6 of us, sometimes 2 of us, and we just stayed with it and kept trying to contact people, having different events. We had the Winter Solstice display, which was also supported by FFRF. In fact, it was an article that Annie Laurie wrote that caused us to try to contact and find out more information about it. So she snowballed that. She started that snowball. And so my big thing about this group and where I want to see us locally go is just what we're doing right now. Reaching out to people in the state, to people in a few other surrounding states, That's what I want to see. And I had, the other night at Pint Night, we had a young lady that was there, and she said, just from the support that she got from this, she was able to speak out at work when someone was doing something that was against separation of church and state, and she didn't get any backlash from it. She didn't like come out and like point at the people and say, I'm an atheist and you need to quit doing that. She just did it very subtly, and it kind of made the people think, wait a minute, we aren't including everybody. There is somebody here that doesn't think like us. And it made that was a big thing. So I think everybody has to reach out within their comfort level. I don't expect all of y'all to leave here and tomorrow, go to work, and somebody says something, says a prayer before a meeting or does something, you're going to jump up and bang the table and scream that you're an atheist, and don't do that. That might work somewhere, and you might be comfortable doing that, but it's not really going to gain you anything. You have to start in small steps and maybe just say, I don't agree with that, or I have said before when they had a prayer at a meeting and I didn't pray and somebody said something about it, I said, oh, I don't pray in public. Well, I don't pray at all. They don't need to know all that. But when I say I don't pray in public, they're like, oh, well, oh, we're sorry, you know, and it makes them think that there's somebody that doesn't think exactly like them. So that's kind of where.
I just had a thought. I'm involved also with an organization called Rotary International. Some of you may know. And I went to their first time. I've been in 8 years, and I went to a district conference, and they had a lot of prayers before lunch and dinner. And this is an officially secular organization. And I went there because I'm very involved in what they call the Youth Exchange Program. They send thousands of kids across the world every year for the purpose of building world peace. Because if you know a culture, you're less likely to want to go to war with it. And I was talking to the kids afterwards, and I reported some of this information to the Rotary leaders. I said, I had one kid said he heard more about Jesus at the Rotary conference than he does in his own church. And I said, and then another kid said, I thought I joined a secular organization and I avoided religious organizations, and maybe I've made a mistake. And so I was telling this to some of the district leadership, and they said, well, the kids from Europe, you know, it's a different culture. And I said, no, these are the American kids. You guys are missing the boat. The American kids are changing so fast that Rotary can't adapt to it. And then I found out that next year they're having an interfaith service Sunday morning of the conference. And I contacted the district governor, which most Rotarians would be afraid to do because they're like high power person. And I asked him to not do it. And he says, well, that's not going to happen. And I said, okay, well, my group is not represented. Will you have me as a speaker? And he says, what's your group? And I said, atheists. And he says, why would I have you speak? No atheists are going to show up. I said, you just made my point. You don't understand it, but you just made my point. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some neon green shirts and have printed on the back a quote from Paul Harris, the founder of Rotary International. From his book, he says, we specifically ban the discussion of religion and politics in Rotary because it only causes arguments. And so I'm going to wear that to the conference. I'm going to go to the interfaith service and sit there with this bright green shirt on and have pamphlets to hand out of all the quotes of this very famous man in my little world of Rotary. But the thought that occurred to me, if you want to do good service, and this is the first time I've ever made this call, go join a Rotary. They're supposed to be secular. You can quote the founders and turn that organization from religious, which it probably is in Arkansas, back to its secular roots from Chicago. And you can get involved, and if you get 4 or 5 of your friends in the same Rotary Club, in a year or two, you can all get to be on the board, and you can do great things with the big amounts of money that they have, and they're already doing things like eliminating polio. So just a thought.
Hey, kudos for you for pronouncing our state name right this time.
Arkansas, sorry.
Going to where Chris started off with the whole hierarchy of things, I've noticed in the secular movement over the years, we have actually done something in terms of lobbying, secular coalition. So the kind of getting a national group, I mean, of course, there's Freedom From Religion Foundation, and there's other ones, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, that all have some of the separation issues in mind. But the Secular Coalition of America, where it comes to the Congress and Washington, they seem to kind of be at where you were talking about us going. So it's there, but trying to get all the cats to decide to donate the money to it, I guess, is probably the problem. Because I mean, there's definitely grassroots growing, because secular local communities and groups are growing. I mean, in Arkansas, of all places, we've got, probably 15, 20 groups all around the state, which is surprising to some, for sure. And then when you have the Secular Student Alliance growing as fast as it is, it's taking hold. It's just, I don't know if it's, we haven't had the time to evolve into the mass that you're recognizing within the religious organization. So I think we're going to get there. And the more that the right keeps swinging as hard as the right is, the more backlash they're going to get, because some of the stuff they're proposing is so outlandish and ridiculous. Even those that aren't atheists are going to be like, you know what, that's a little far out there on the right for me. So I think their own doing and our organizing and continuing to communicate and grow your local community is eventually going to be to a tipping point to where we get there. So
I'm in agreement with Dan on speaking out, obviously, and complaining. And a quick note: the 2005 Supreme Court decision, Van Orton v. Perry, which was about the Ten Commandments monument on my state capitol grounds that was put there by the Eagles. Justice Breyer's opinion, he went one way on a Kentucky case and he went the other way on the Texas case. And one of the things that he said is basically this monument has stood here for 40 years and nobody complained, and so that demonstrates that it has some kind of secular purpose. So complain. Most definitely. Justice Breyer has given you your marching orders to complain early and often and loudly. As far as building up from the ground up, yes, I love doing that. I like the think globally, act locally. But the key thing is to do something, do anything. Get involved. And if everybody fixed their backyard, the whole world's fixed. And so even if you're just involved, talking to your neighbors, if you're expressing some dissenting opinion, that's a start. The fact that they know that their next door neighbor is an atheist, the person who they like already. Oh, that's how often do we hear, oh, you're an atheist, but you're so nice. We should probably hear that more often, but we do hear it quite a bit. And another aspect of this that has got to do with how we build our groups is we're working towards specific goals. And if you agree with those goals and the group has that mission, then you can work together and know that you are, in fact, going to disagree with each other about all sorts of other things, because the one thing that we agree on is that there's not this God thing, and everything else is pretty much fair game. I've disagreed with you. You can't name a person in the atheist community that I haven't disagreed with. Dan said something this morning that I disagree with, and I'm pretty sure Dan and I are going to stay friends and keep working towards the same goals. It's going to happen, and so we can't. We're experiencing some growing pains, and that we started fairly small and we're exploding, and now everybody wants to get in and get their pet ideas in play, and that's fine as long as we can do it while recognizing that we may not always agree, and that we have these other goals, which is my goal is to change the whole damn world. I want to fix it all, which is kind of big, so I start with little bitty tiny portions of it, and I think that everybody can do that. You don't have to have any relevant expertise to do a little something to fix the world.
My turn here. Is this working all right? Well, if Bishop Dillahunty is disagreeing with me, I don't know. I'm in trouble here. The Van Orden case that you mentioned, where Justice Breyer said that he was tipped by the fact that there were no complaints in it. The brief that we just submitted to the Supreme Court in favor of AU's brief in the Greece decision, we pointed out that Justice Breyer was wrong, and we documented repeated complaints over the Ten Commandments monument there in Austin. Over the years, back when it first went up in the 70s, we complained, so that just never got into the record. If it had got into the record, then Breyer might not have had that out on on the Ten Commandments there. So we're hammering that home as part of our amicus brief that Breyer was wrong about that. It wasn't his fault. But here's the evidence that, in fact, people have complained. Your complaints do matter. So maybe at your high school, they're doing something and the principal says, but nobody's ever complained. Well, until now, if you as a parent just complain, just say something, they can't say no one's complained if you are complaining about it. So you may not change their mind overnight. But to answer your question, Chris, which I think is an excellent question, and I think it's a great goal to see how close we can get to the successful model of other organizations. But we're never going to get close to what religions do, because we're hampered with some serious problems as freethinkers. We can't lie, and we can't threaten. The threat of hell, the threat of eternal damnation, the lies about all that. How many of you are going to pledge 10% of your annual income to ASF, right? One. And there's that motivation that religion has to get people to give. My grandmother, who was a moderate Christian, believer, every month she sent $15 to Billy Graham Association. Every month. Not knowing that Billy Graham had $15 million surplus and didn't need her money. But she was doing this out of devotion. It wasn't a rational thing. So we're hampered by the fact that in our non-movement, or whatever you want to call it, we don't have those kind of recourses to threaten into your eternal destiny. So we're never going to get 5 million people to send $50. But I think everyone in this room has donated, has given. All of us personally have given and sacrificed to some degree, and that's, I think, part of what's fueling this current new growth in our non-movement. What's the word for it? It's a movement, I guess, demographically, but a movement with no followers.
Well, here's I think a good panel moderator throws grenades every once in a while, and you can throw it right back if you don't like it, I guess. But I think that here's the grenade. Sometimes we mistake winning the culture war with an Oxford-style debate. We think if we can win the debate, and if we have the evidence on our side and the arguments on our side, voila, we've won. And we've been thinking that for a few hundred years now, and we haven't won. And I think that the question to the panel that comes out of that is, what do we need to do different than we've done before? Because we've been winning the debate for hundreds of years, and we still live in a culture with a church on every street corner. And I kind of wonder if grassroots organizing, how does that factor into getting to that 5 million FRF number, which I think is totally realistic, because we're seeing a lot of things now and today, like this conference, that people couldn't, it was a wild, crazy fantasy just 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, I was just going to say, I think one thing we can do is play more kickball. And the reason I was going to say that is because that lets people know that we're regular people. They don't even know that there's freethinkers, atheists, agnostics on that team, but they see them out there playing. They see Leewood flying a kite through a whole game, running the bases. They see us out there participating with the community. There's like how many teams, Leewood? Hundreds. Well, hundreds of players, about 40 teams. We're out there as the nonprofits. Yes, we borrowed a name. and they see us out there, and we get to talk to people and communicate with them on a different level. And then somebody goes, "Oh, did you know that they're atheists? Did you know they're freethinkers?" And some people are going, "What's that?"
Well, I think there's a couple things we can do, and one of them we're getting better as a community is we need stories. People love stories. A lot of people aren't in religion because it was logical and made sense to them. It was because it felt right. When I talk, I try to bring in stories of things that have happened to me and my family or people that I know. And sometimes when I tell the stories like today, I can hear people respond. Just the crowd responds en masse, and it touches you. And those are the kind of stories you need to share with religious people. But also, I agree 100% with the complaining, but I also sometimes am a little bit of a satirical prick. The story I was telling earlier today, I was buying a mattress once in Bentonville, and I get to the point of purchase, and it was me and my wife and the kids, and they bring out this long form, and at the bottom there's a Bible quote. To buy a mattress, there's a Bible quote. And I asked the clerk behind the counter, I said, what is this? And he says, it's a quote from the Bible. And I said, I'm sorry, I phrased my question incorrectly. Why is there a phrase from the Bible on the bottom of this? And he says, well, that's what the owners want. And I asked him if he was a Christian. And he said, of course I am. I said, you read the Bible every day? He says, of course I do. I said, you know what a money changer is? And he said he did not. So I explained to him that Jesus went into the temple, which was his father's house, and flipped tables, beat people, whipped people, kicked them all out, and maybe I'm not technically correct in the story, but he understood what I was talking about. And I said, you, sir, are a money changer. You are not using our Father's house. You're using our Father's words to make money, and it's wrong. And if I hadn't spent the last 2 hours looking for this damn mattress, I would not buy from you. I am so upset that I can't even explain to you right now, but I'm going to go ahead and sign this, and you can talk to my wife about it. And I stormed out of the store. I figured she'd be right out. She came out 15 minutes later, and I said, what took so long? And she goes, he would not stop apologizing. So I out-Christianed him.
So evidently we can lie.
No, I was offended. I was offended.
As a Christian?
Well,
He's okay.
if I were a Christian.
Former Christian.
Yeah.
Does Daryl have a question back there?
Tactical lies.
Well, yeah, I want to make one observation. One thing I've not heard from anybody is something I'm passionate about, and that's building an infrastructure for our whole community that meets the emotional needs. That's why we've got No Longer Quivering and Secular Sobriety and Recovering from Religion and the Therapist Project and Grief Beyond Belief. There is a whole community that's starting to come up, and I'd like to hear us talk a little bit more about that. How are we meeting the emotional needs of the secular community? And I think we're just new at that. I'm not saying it's right. You guys, I'm not saying anything negative, just saying we aren't talking about that yet. And I hear a lot of political stuff, but there's emotional needs that churches meet out there, and we're just now learning how to do that. So that's my non-question.
All right, I'll kick this one off. We're meeting emotional needs because we provide something that churches, there's a word that the churches use to describe what we're doing right now. I hate this word and won't use it, but I'll make an exception here on this panel. It's called fellowship. Yeah. And by doing the social things we do, we're creating fellowship, and that's the support network among all of us. We did have a Recovering from Religion group that kind of died away. We have a desperate need for someone to lead that. We need leaders for the Recovering from Religion group. We have a number of members who are alcoholics. We do a lot of stuff that you could go on our meetup group and see all our photos. There's alcohol. Oh my God, that's vodka, isn't it? But, we do a lot of things where we drink, and we need to have safe places for our alcoholic members that don't tempt them when they're in that period where they can't take the temptation. So I agree with you. We need to be able to do that. We're working on doing that. We need more people to step up to take leadership roles. So if that's something you're interested in, that's something where you can help us. Not only are we going to greet you with open arms, we're going to jump up and down, hug you, kiss you, and give you free rein to organize. We would absolutely love that here in the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. There are other aspects of the social group that are really important. I'm looking out at this crowd. We have a huge number of gay and lesbian members, mostly because I think a lot of them have been damaged by religion. They have been belittled, denigrated, marginalized, told they're not worthy of love. This group has no basis for saying that. There is absolutely no dogma that we're going to spew that says someone is not welcome.
Can we get a quick hand poll of how many people have lived at one point in your life where if you told people the truth about what you believed, it was plausible that you would have every last one of your friends leave you and you would have 0 friends in your life? Okay, that's the role of the local organization, I'm afraid.
So to touch on this just a little bit more, Jerry's not in here yet, is he? Slacker.
I don't think he's made it yet.
Oh, I'm going to light into him. He probably won't get here till right after I leave. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of areas where we need to make improvements. I think we're doing a good job starting down those paths. We've had such a massive growth as far as attendance and conferences and small groups, and people are doing better. But Daryl's right, and Daryl's done amazing stuff with Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapist Project, and Dale McGowan with the Foundation Beyond Belief and Grief Beyond Belief and all these other issues. And Jerry is starting to have what has been called atheist church. I don't call it that. Even Jerry doesn't like to call it that. But these communities that engage in the sort of social activities that typically are associated with churches. I don't like the label church because church is not only a specifically Christian label, it's a specifically Protestant label, and so it makes it sound like you're an atheist against just the Protestant God or what. I don't know. It's not for me, but for the people who need that and want that, whether it's a transitional process or something they want to do for their entire life, good for them. I mean, by all means, enjoy it. And we should be as open to as many different experiences of atheism as there are. And as I mentioned during my talk yesterday, that 12-year-old girl who killed herself so she could go to heaven to be with her dad, we definitely need to do a better job of teaching people to deal with grief for sure. One of the things is that if you have this idea of an afterlife, my view is that it cheapens everything about this life. And if you get rid of that and you instead begin to teach people that death is an ultimate, unavoidable, unless the transhumanists turn out to be right later, part of life, that this gives, you can come up with coping mechanisms that allow people to understand this and process it in a way that may in fact be better than lying to them about fairy tales that could result. Now there's still going to be people who are depressed and suicidal, and we should get them help, and we should be open about talking about mental illness and problems and things like that. But if there were 100 girls that were going to kill themselves because their dad died, some portion of them are going to do it because they think they're going to go to heaven to be with him. And so if we eliminate that idea, we've at least reduced the number of incidents like that. And that's, like I said yesterday, it's one of the reasons why I do what I do. And I think we're getting better. I think we're kind of on the path, but there's a whole lot of work to be done. And not just that, but as far as diversity. This is not a particularly diverse crowd. We're pretty good male to female ratio type things, but there's not a lot with regard to racial diversity, ethnic diversity. And we need to make inroads in those areas too. And one of these days, I'll be invited to a conference and I'll be the only old white guy there. And that'll be cool. But.
All right, we've got just 2 or 3 more minutes left in our allotted time. We've got a couple of comments or questions, and you want to hop up to the mic so we can record it?
I notice when if I'm on a social network and at the bottom it says religious affiliation, and the biggest demographic it appears to be is spiritual but not religious. Okay, now what does that mean? That to me, I don't know who those people are, but I think it's people who understand that organized religion isn't working, doesn't make any sense. They don't know where to go. They don't know there's an alternative philosophy. They don't know there are alternative social groups.
I think you just answered your own question.
And that's the message we need to tell them. We're there.
Yep.
Next up.
Stand this way. I think there's something magical about the word and experience encouragement. And if you're going to do a grassroots effort, you have to watch master gardeners. You have to watch people who have built. When I was building youth groups, I would put 1 leader per 5 people. And so those 5 kids knew. And if you see somebody on Facebook who has done a good, encourage them. And I'm going to say, and I'm done, almost done. I've been in the movement 5 years. I've tried to start a group, but then my life fell apart. I pretty much got fired for saying, I put in the paper that I was starting a Freethinker group, and they called me on Saturday. Well, I don't even ever work on Saturday, and I went ahead and came in, but I knew what. And they were all around in the nursing station and said, "What's a Freethinker?"
We love you.
Well,
do you have a
okay,
question?
But wait, I want to say, you have to encourage each other, and I'm going to say something kind of negative, and I'm all about it positive.
Can you put it in the form of a question?
Yes. Well, okay. I think we tend to be very much in our head. We're a high IQ movement, and there is not enough encouragement. It tends to be a little cold. And when you have to identify somebody who would be good at getting a group of guys to fix up a broken shopping center so you can have a place to meet, or somebody who's really gifted at kids, and you encourage them, to where eventually we have a Sunday school here at this conference. But it grows through encouragement. You have to, and it's wonderful to give it and to receive it. And if you don't receive it, you won't stay in the movement. You just won't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to comment on encouragement?
We do need to give each other a pat on the back for being here, for doing what we're doing, for doing, just tell people that you appreciate them and what they're doing, because a lot of times we bounce from topic to topic, and again, we think it's an Oxford-style debate when it's really, let's do something fun, and let's support each other.
I'd like to go ahead and recognize Mark Love over there running sound and
Yes.
presentation. Mark's done a tremendous job, and I will say, as one of the founding members, Mark and Susan have been just bedrock people in this organization. If it were not for Mark and Susan, this organization would not be quite where it is today, because they have stuck with us thick and thin through 99% of all the events that we do. Mark and Susan are there, and we love you guys for that. Thank you very much.
And I want to mention that one of our other founding members is back there, Sybil Smith. If it wasn't for her,